NFL All Day fans, welcome back to the Pro Sports Podcasters. It's that time of year again. We're heading into week 1 of the NFL season, and that means it's time for Rumble, right? OTM Rumble, Own the Moment Rumble is about to begin, and this season it isn't a week-to-week competition. It's actually a season-long competition to try and get yourself entered as many times as possible into the finals for week 15, 16, and 17. And when it comes to winning at Rumble, there's one key aspect that you cannot look past, and that's your hero. You need to pick the right hero. But what goes into that? If you're serious about winning at OTM Rumble and you want to know how to get the advantage, I'm going to go over what it takes with my wife, Amy, to actually pick the top Rumble heroes week in, week out. What do we use? What strategies do we employ to find the best possible players? Let's get into it. So like I said, I've got Amy with me.
Hi.
And we're going to go over a 5-step process that we utilize in order to pick the right Rumble hero each and every week. I used this last season, and I didn't have a very extensive collection of rares. I had very few viable rares for Rumble. As a result of that, this particular season, I'm actually not doing the Rumble contest. Amy is going to have 2 lineups, one for her, one for me, basically, because she has a much better Rumble collection of rares than I do. It just always happens to be that way. If you've been following the channel, you know every time we crack a pack, she always gets the better rares in that pack. So let's go over the 5 steps. And it begins with step number 1.
Expected points.
So what you got to do here is a lot of people will instinctively look to the fantasy footballers, fantasy pros, CBS Sports, ESPN or NFL.com because they think they're going to go by the PPR rankings or whoever they say is hot this week. That is not where you go. If you want the absolute best advice when it comes to the potential of a player, what you should do first is go to your betting sites. Those guys are paid serious money to figure out what the lines are. And what you're looking for here are high over-under point totals because you want players who will be involved in high-scoring games. And you also want to go, if possible, with the winning team, so the team that's favored. So we've gone ahead and we've figured out which the top teams are for this particular week. But before we get to that, let's go over the full 5 steps. So what's step 2?
Player team health.
Right? You don't want to start somebody injured.
No.
It's that simple. It's that simple. And I mean, let's be honest, every single betting site, every fantasy site out there is going to tell you whether players are injured, if they're questionable, if they're doubtful. And that'll be updated as the week goes on. And this is Rumble, so it doesn't lock till Sunday, so you can keep watch all the way till Sunday to see how healthy the players are. And of course, if somebody had a big game on Thursday, go ahead and slot them in.
Yep.
Step 3.
Chalk or not.
Right? You got to decide. Do you want to play as your hero someone that someone else is going to play? Right? If you're playing Patrick Mahomes, you know for damn sure everyone's playing Patrick Mahomes. So if you're going to play Patrick Mahomes, you're basically going ahead and saying, I'm hoping the rest of my lineup is a little bit better and that my Rumble hero will at least get me what most of the other people are playing will get them. Or you can go against the chalk and pick somebody that you think this particular week is favorable for that other people might not pick.
Yeah.
That's how I had to play it last season, but it isn't necessarily the best way to go if there's a for sure thing that you don't want to miss out on.
Yeah.
Step 4.
Player stamina.
So you got player stamina, and that factors into a number of things. So I've marked down here, we've got short weeks. If somebody plays on Sunday or Monday and then they got to play on Thursday, it's a short week. They don't get much time to relax. Probably they're not going to put up as many fantasy points as they usually do. If they got to travel from one side of the country to the other, or in some cases now to Germany or to England, that can factor into the performance, right? And also if they've been utilized a lot. So if someone, let's say one team has just been wearing off the tires on their running back, you could maybe notice that he's been getting burnt out, in which case you might not want to start him the following week.
Right.
So that's the player stamina. And step 5?
Recent success.
Yeah, go with the hot hand, right? If you've got somebody who's been killing it, ride that hot hand, right? If they're in great form, you got a wide receiver who's catching 7 catches per game on the reg, then why not just roll with them, right? Who cares who they're playing against? If that guy's on fire, go with it, because chances are he's going to keep rolling until he gets injured or until he burns out. And again, then you're looking back to step 4 or step 3, right?
And then we're going to go with the tiebreaker. Go with your lowest serial number.
Yeah, if it's down to 2 players, let's say you've got Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes, and you're like, oh, they both got favorable matchups. They're both playing at home. They're both in top form. Which one do I go with? Which one do I go with? If you can't decide, just go with the lowest serial number, right? Just go with the lower serial number. That way you've got a better chance at the tiebreakers later on. If somebody else has the same score as you, maybe your serial numbers make the difference.
Yeah.
Right? So those are the 5 rules that we go by. And let's look at rule number 1 specifically to week 1 this week. And in week 1, we've got the best possible matchups and the worst possible matchups, right? So these are according to the betting sites, right? They're going with the most likely highest scoring games, which teams are favored, and the lowest scoring games, which teams are favored. Now, you might think, why would I care about the lowest scoring games? Shouldn't I just avoid them entirely? No, because you still got to pick a defense.
Yep.
So if you can pick the defense of the lowest scoring game on the winning side, chances are you're going to have a pretty good defense for that week. So that's something to always look at. But let's look at the top 3 games of week 1. I've got them in order from best to worst. What's the first one?
So you got Lions at Chiefs.
Yeah, of course. You get the opening game of the season on Thursday night. You got the Super Bowl champions facing the Lions. The Lions that used to be one of the shittiest teams in the league have finally come of age.
Yeah.
They're not a joke any longer. They're probably going to make the playoffs. They could even fight to win the division. So this is supposed to be a high-scoring game. They've got this picked as the highest-scoring game of the week. And, of course, they got the Chiefs favored. So right away, you're looking at players like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce. Even on the Lions side, because it's such a high-scoring game, and they're going to have to try and match pace with the Kansas City Chiefs, you've got, like, Amon-Ra St. Brown, right? You've got Jahmyr Gibbs. People are probably excited to see him go to work. You know, you've got David Montgomery. So there are a number of players that are viable in this particular contest that you could possibly choose as a Rumble hero. What's the next highest scoring game?
Dolphins at Chargers.
Dolphins at Chargers, and the Chargers are favored. And again, both these games, another thing I like about them is that the favored team is at home, which is always an added benefit, right? Not always do I like to go with the favored team when they're playing away.
Yeah.
But this is at home for the Chargers in that super stadium. Dolphins, Chargers, Tua versus Justin. This is going to be a crazy high-scoring game with a lot of viable players.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert is viable. Tua Tagovailoa is viable. Tyreek Hill is viable. Jalen Waddle is viable. Mike Williams is viable. Keenan Allen is viable. Austin Eckler is viable. So you've got a lot of choice here. There's a lot of choice. So you don't have to have a huge collection, but if you've got any of these guys in your collection, this is a possible Rumble pick for you. And then the last one?
Bengals at Browns.
Bengals at Browns. Now, the Bengals are favored. They're away, which I don't like. But again, we're talking about a very high-scoring offense here, and everybody knows what the Bengals are all about. It's Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, right? You've also got Joe Mixon as a sneaky, maybe good pick there as well. And again, these are guys that are very well known. Now, let's look at the lesser known and what particular players could stand out that really aren't on these lists. And for the first one I want to look at here is when you look at the low-scoring games. In a low-scoring game, the one position that tends to benefit the most is running back, right? These are grinder games. They tend to put up a lot of yards. So you're looking at some pretty good fantasy points here. So when we look at the low-scoring games, what's the worst of the group?
Cardinals at Commanders.
Cardinals at Commanders. And the Commanders are currently favored by more than a touchdown. That's a significant advantage. So with the Commanders, you got Antonio Gibson, right? He's your running back there. So he's got opportunities. So that might be something you want to look at if you've got an inexpensive, because generally Antonio Gibsons are inexpensive, Rumble option at rare. Next one?
Panthers at Falcons.
Panthers at Falcons. We get to see the debut of Bijan Robinson, of which there's been nothing but off-season hype about. If you're playing fantasy football, I'm sure you went in the first round or maybe the second round at the worst of your draft. Bijan Robinson gets to go to work, and the Falcons took him real early in the draft for a reason, so he's going to get some work. So there's a possibility there, too. Again, the Falcons are favored.
Yep.
And?
Titans at Saints.
We got the Titans at the Saints. Now, unfortunately, Alvin Kamara is serving his suspension. So he won't be starting, so you're out of luck there. With the Saints, you got Derek Carr going to make his debut as a Saint. Personally, I would stay away from this particular game as far as Rumble heroes go, because you don't know who's going to step up. Maybe Chris Olave, maybe, but you don't know. So Chris Olave could be a sneaky pick, but you're really rolling the dice on that one. But again, if you want to go away from the chalk, that's an option. But otherwise, the only Saints I'm playing are on my defense. And last?
The 49ers at the Steelers.
49ers and Steelers, and the 49ers are favored in Pittsburgh. Tough place to play, but this is the 49ers, right? These guys tend to go to the Super Bowl quite often, and you've got the single best running back in fantasy football on the team. So you've got Christian McCaffrey. Expect this to be the Christian McCaffrey show. So I'd have no issue starting Christian McCaffrey, but know that he's a well-known name, right? This is a god in the league. So there's going to be a lot of people starting him if they have them. I know Amy has him, so she might actually go with him this week. But let's take a look at what Amy's got as far as Rumble viable heroes and figure out what she could start in one of her lineups this particular week.
Okay, so we're going to start with quarterbacks.
So who do you have at quarterback?
So I have Trevor Lawrence,
Jaguars,
Lamar Jackson,
Ravens,
Derek Carr,
Saints, like we had mentioned,
and Ryan Tannehill.
the Titans. So the Titans didn't come up in any of our metrics.
No.
So Ryan Tannehill's a scratch there.
Yeah.
Derek Carr, again, we don't know what's going to happen with him in New Orleans. We don't know what he's going to be asked to do. So that's a gutsy pick. Lamar Jackson is fantasy gold. So even though he didn't come up in the games that we're highlighting, it is someone that you could roll with probably week in, week out, because he gets points with his arm and with his feet. And of course, Trevor Lawrence, I mean, sunshine. The kid's been slinging it, but didn't come up in our metrics.
Correct.
So I'd probably stay away from this week. So in QBs, she doesn't have a great option.
No.
Lamar Jackson's
Lamar
probably
Jackson's
your best.
probably my number one.
Running backs?
So I have Christian McCaffrey and Damian Harris, and then I'm obviously just going to go with McCaffrey.
Yeah, and in those situations, obviously McCaffrey, especially because the 49ers are favored in a low-scoring game where it's going to be a running back affair. So there's an option. Wide receiver?
Wide receiver, I have DK Metcalf.
Seahawks.
Jalen Waddle.
Dolphins, which we mentioned.
Yeah, Chris Godwin.
Tampa Bay Bucks.
Debo Samuel.
49ers, which we mentioned.
Devontae Adams.
Who's now what? Is he still a Raider? I think a Raider.
I think he's still a Raider.
Yeah.
Mike Williams.
The Chargers, which we mentioned as a favorite.
And Mike Evans.
Bucks, which we did not mention. So amongst this group, she's got Mike Williams, who was mentioned in our metrics. And Jalen Waddle, who was mentioned in our metrics. Now, you've also got Devontae Adams, DK Metcalf. Like, these are studs, right? So if you've got them and you feel like you want to play them, don't be afraid to play them. Someone's got to get the points on every team. But when you're looking at which games are going to put up the numbers, then Jalen Waddle is a very, very tempting one here, and so is Mike Williams. So Amy has two lineups. If she decides she wants to go with Christian McCaffrey in one of her lineups, in the second lineup, she could go with Mike Williams or Jalen Waddle because of that.
That's running back to wide receiver. Okay.
Tight end?
Tight end, I have Mark Andrews and Logan Thomas.
So neither of those teams came up, right? You got Mark Andrews, the number one target for Lamar Jackson in Baltimore. But Baltimore isn't part of our metrics, but this is a stud tight end. And then you got Logan Thomas. This guy's getting a little long in the tooth, but he's going to be a key component of the Commanders' offense. So the Commanders were in our workup as a 7.5-point favorite. Someone's going to get the touchdowns. Maybe you want to go way off the reservation and roll with Logan Thomas, but I wouldn't feel comfortable doing so because he isn't really that fantasy relevant week in, week out. Right? So those are the guys that she has available. These are the people she'll be running with week in, week out. For week one, for just one of your lineups, who's your hero going to be?
Oh, no. You don't really want to do the obvious. Like, I don't want to pick a quarterback, and I don't want to pick Christian McCaffrey because that's pretty much what everybody's going to do. So I'd probably go with Jalen Waddle and hope for the best.
Okay. See, and Jalen Waddle is a contrarian pick because anyone who uses our system and looks at that matchup against the Chargers is probably going to go Tyreek Hill first. But if you paid attention last season to the numbers, sure, Tyreek Hill had big games, but so did Jalen Waddle. It's very similar to the Jamar Chase, T. Higgins situation in Cincinnati, where there are certain weeks that T. Higgins have better weeks, and there are certain weeks that Jamar Chase has better weeks. Same thing goes for Hill and Waddle. So Waddle would be a pretty sneaky pick to begin the season with in a game that I actually picked as the most exciting game of week 1 to actually roll with your Rumbo hero there. So let's look down the line with all the steps. So expected points, favored team. Not the favored team, but the expected points are very high.
Yes.
So she's rolling with that. Player team health. Waddle's in perfect health. Tua is in the strongest condition he's ever been, so I wouldn't worry about that. Chalk or not, Waddle will not be chalk.
No.
This is not a chalk pick, right? So you're going to have more people choosing other heroes than Waddle. It gives Amy a little bit of an advantage if he does go off, right? Stamina, week-long travel doesn't pay any point here because it's week one, right? And then recent success, again, no point here because it's week 1. But as the season continues, both the player stamina and the recent success is going to be important for you when you're picking your heroes. Let us know which hero you're going with and if you're going to use our system for the rest of this season.
Good luck.
Till next time.